Survivor's ready.
If anybody has a hidden immunity idol and you want to play it, now would be the time to do so.
The queen stays queen.
You said rustle feathers.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to calamity. We have ripe bananas all the time.
Dude, my prize isn't even $1 million. My prize was that I fell in love in this game. Love at first sight. Her name is Candace.
You officially go down as the dumbest survivor ever.
Welcome to Not Game, All Personal. Hey, we are a Survivor podcast here talking about all things Survivor, more specifically the finale of season 47. I'm Nathan. This is Tony. Tony, we have a new winner.
We have a new winner. Look at it. Look at today.
We called it, right? I mean, not super shocking.
No,
I'm
I'm definitely pleased.
I think the biggest shock to me is going into the episode. I think most people keeping up, felt like she was the front runner.
Mm-hmm.
The final tribal had me.
I got a little nervous.
Right, where I was like, oh, is this the direction it's going to go? And then it ends up being a pretty dominant win. Only one vote not for her, which is, what's the number? 7-1, 8-1?
7-1.
7-1. So right back to like, okay, this is what I thought was going to happen. So kind of grateful the episode at least edited it in a way that kept me guessing, even though the result was what I knew was going to happen before the episode even started.
Well, I saw an article before we recorded, and even Rachel was unsure that she was going to win after that tribal. So like, it wasn't even just an us thing. Like, she also felt that, which isn't surprising. Like, Sam had a very, very good final tribal.
It was good.
But, I mean, ultimately, like, yeah, you can't argue with the amazing game she had, I guess.
So, how important is Final Tribal then? I guess, because I think if that's the case, where not even us watching it, but like people sitting there, herself included, thinking like, oh, he had a stronger case here. I mean, are people's minds already made up?
I don't know if that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, I think the gap between the two of them was so large. Like, I think he made some good points and probably answered questions better. But I think the totality of her game and the fact that the episode she played her idol, everybody was kind of just saying that she was playing the best game. Like, that was just the understanding, is that she was. If it was a closer battle between the two of them, say he had won a couple immunities, had driven a couple votes, then I think that's when it matters. Like, I think he just had so much to make up in this case that it just wasn't doable.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I did have the thought, and we'll get into all the specifics, but when he almost lost fire, I was getting ready for the take. Like, if he loses fire, especially if he would have lost it with how bad it was looking for a moment, I was full on like, this dude's a fraud. I was ready for it. I was like, okay. So the fact that he doesn't have a single win, not a single advantage, tanks the fire, wrong side of the vote. So, like, what did we see in him? And he ends up winning fire and having a strong... So I'm not coming out on him as strong as I thought I was going to, but there were moments where I was ready to just unleash. I'm like...
Just unload on him.
We were wrong. This guy was never had a chance.
Always bad. No one ever liked him. He's not charismatic.
Right.
Not even handsome. Just like unload the clip.
Exactly. But not the case. I do think he was a very good player. I would say, despite having almost nothing work in his favor, right? I think like I did enjoy the comparison of their two games because it did feel like his game is one that Rachel almost wanted to play. And she did even bring that up in the sense, like, she wasn't planning on being this comp beast, right? Like, she wanted to, like, have more control and do all these things. And it felt like he had more of the strategy. And in the inverse, he, I think, came out, maybe not him specifically, but, like, everyone assumed that he would be this comp beast. He would be this, like, big threat. And that ended up being Rachel. So I actually really enjoyed just comparing their two games and having the two of them sit there, kind of be like, yeah, we actually didn't want to do what we had to do, but we had to do what we ended up doing to get here. So I just thought it was a great comparison looking at the two of them, try to explain that.
I don't know. I would say, at least from my mind, they were pretty comparable in the like decisions that they made and the things that they did. It just happened that I don't know if she did it earlier and that became is what raised her threat level, but he was always on the bottom and he was just able to scrape together the people on the bottom. But half the time it was people coming to him. Like I feel like he wasn't making a ton of the strategic decisions, which is what kind of hurts him. And was she making strategic decisions? Maybe not either. I don't know. It's tough to say because neither of them were driving the boat. And so that's almost like a narrative that you just like push to the side. They were both on the bottom for at a time. She was able to successfully get into an alliance that was strong enough that everybody else had to band together to take a shot at. Um, and then the end game is just anybody, like you're just trying to get out anybody. So at that point, threat level almost goes out the window. I feel like I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
just said a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the main difference I see is with both of them playing from the bottom in different ways and on different sides at
Mm-hmm.
times. It was like, what did they have to rely on? And so for her, she had to rely on wins and advantages, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
For him, he relied on, I think, just strategy. I mean, Operation Italy's obviously the big one, but I think there were other moments where he successfully lowered his threat level at least below Genevieve's for the time
Mm-hmm.
being. Um, the fire doesn't really play in the strategy, but like the way that they both had drastically different ways that they survived,
Yeah.
and I think that's the interesting thing is where there was almost nothing to compare them to, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, my biggest move is that I tied the record for most immunity wins for a female. Sam's game move is like, I made it here without having to win anything. So it's like those are two like very drastically
Yeah.
opposing points, and it happened that almost their entire games opposed each other.
Yeah, I would almost say that they're complete opposites because he wasn't a target, especially deep in the game, because he couldn't win those challenges. Like there was always the potential, but he just never pulled it out. And so he was always somebody that they felt like they needed to get rid of, but also he hadn't done anything, so they didn't feel like they needed to take that shot. One of the big things that he mentioned, or I'll finish that thought before I go into this. So like he almost just kept his threat level low by not winning anything, kind of like you said, and then she kept winning things because her threat level was already high. And so it's just like the perception of the game and how they're playing it that's interesting. One thing that he said is I've received 10 votes in this game, and like in that whole like he had a couple things that he called out in that moment. Every vote that he had, he was always the second choice. Like I specifically went through and checked. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
always, oh, they split the vote between Sam and Genevieve. Oh, they split the vote between Sam and Genevieve, but Genevieve was the target. They split the vote between Sierra and Sam, but Sierra was the target. Like, yes, he was voted for, but he was always seen as the secondary target because his threat level. And that I just, that kind of, he said that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me think about that. And then I like looked at it and I was like, okay, yes, he was voted for 10 times. It's not
Mm-hmm.
exactly in the context that you think it is.
No, that's a valid point. I actually didn't think about that. And I was giving him a lot of credit, being like, "Oh, that's yeah, wow, he was voted for a lot of times." But no, that's interesting. Yeah, I
And
mean,
I don't say that
overall,
to like entirely diminish his game because he did take a
mm-hmm.
part in Operation Italy, and I think he was scrappy and he was making moves when it felt like his game was dead, and he survived, and that's valuable.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, compared to hers, it didn't match up to me.
But I think that does, in a way, explain why his final tribal performance was so strong, because he just it felt like he knew how to twist
Yeah.
just any given situation into his favor. And I think
Hmm.
that's a good example. I think there were countless times where I had myself thinking, I was like, oh, Rachel actually is a bad player because she won immunity, which I'm like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, that's not true. Like, that's part of the
Yeah.
game. But, like, he worded everything in a way that you couldn't help but view that as like, oh, that is a good point. He is a good player because of this.
Hmm.
And I think now that, like, we're removed from that situation, seeing the result, it's like, oh, okay, he was just really trying to manipulate the jury there. And almost successfully. I don't know if we can say it was successful because it didn't really work, but at the moment, he was very good at that.
I thought he might win the game, and yeah, I saw the article that Rachel thought that she lost the game, like after that final tribal, because he like presented that so well. But I think just the totality of her perception, the perception of her game was too strong for him to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. But yeah, overall, I mean, I thought it was a good finale. I think I'm still on the page of like maybe splitting this up into 2 weeks was a good thing. Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts on that? The fact that we don't have to talk about the Genevieve vote on this finale episode?
it's kind of nice because, like you said last week, like that vote got to breathe on its own, and now we can just talk about the finale and like don't have to worry. Like, yeah, we'll talk about fire making. We'll cover some of that stuff, but like the what really matters is the vote. Even though that Genevieve vote was important and was also very interesting. So last week, getting to really dig into that was, I think, very very valuable.
Yes. Before we get into some of the more specifics, I think it is also worth noting that the boot order that was leaked by Rome was essentially correct.
Was
The
it? I
only
didn't.
the only
Go ahead.
difference was he put Caroline 2 spots earlier. So he had Caroline, Gabe, Kyle when it was Gabe, Kyle, Caroline. Um, but outside of that, he listed them all in order. Exactly. So screw you, Roan.
So he's never coming back.
I mean, probably not.
Yeah, that's gonna yeah, eliminate you forever from
Now
a lot like any shows it feels like.
he didn't straight up say it, but he basically just listed them all out in a different context. I believe it was like an interview, exit interview, and he was giving his thoughts on the whole cast, and so people
Hmm.
just kind of picked up because they noticed he. I think what he did is he went through um, the pre-jury backwards and then went through who was left in the game backwards as well. So then people picked up like, wait a minute, the pre-jury was in order. So does that mean this one was also in order?
Yeah.
Um,
So it might not have even been intentional, but that's still pretty tough.
yeah,
It could have been.
unfortunately, he does have deniability because he
Yeah.
technically didn't say that was the boot order, but
If they gave him an alphabetical list, it's easier to go one by one. But when you're thinking about them, like that's an easy way to keep them in order and make sure you don't forget anybody.
I don't know. So either he's an idiot or he is just evil. One of the two, I think, is
I'm
right.
fine
Is
with those
that
options. I'm fine with just living in that tension.
all right? And hopefully, it's the last time we ever had to talk about him. Yeah, let's talk about this final four. Rachel wins again,
Hmm.
tying the record amongst who was it? Chrissy, Kim, uh,
Jenna and Kelly Wigglesworth.
Wigglesworth, which also new record update that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about. So maybe this will be breaking for us. Rachel officially beats the record for most confessionals ever from a female in a
Oh
season.
wow!
Yeah. Do
So
you
she
want to
didn't break
know?
Russell's, but she got up there.
She got up there, number one female. Do you want to take a guess who the number one female ever is?
Oh, so? Didn't you? She just broke it, so it's her. But who it was? Do you mean?
Yeah, sorry. What were yes?
Okay, that's what you
Which
said, but it was like a weird way to ask that.
shoot, I just had it pulled up. So she had
Oh,
86 for the entire season, which let me just say, Sam had the most this season at 93. So Rachel's the number one female at 86. That just shows like
and she
how
didn't even
much
have the
more.
most in her season.
No,
Isn't Russell's like 100 and something?
I don't have that up in front of me, but I think that just shows like I'm curious how many guys have more confessionals than the number one female. Like you know what I mean? That just it feels absurd.
Yeah.
Shoot, where's the number now? Okay, so she had 86, and
The first thing that
the
comes to mind is like a Kim because she's kind of dominant. Actually, I want to go Denise
okay, so
because I
the
think,
the record was 85, so she just beat it by one.
yeah, I think I want to go Denise because she also went to every tribal, and so every single episode, her tribe was being visited, and she was a part of driving some of those votes. So that's my guess is Denise.
It is not Denise. I'll give you a hint. It is pre. What season do I want to? It's pre Survivor Heroes versus Villains.
3.
Not Suri.
Okay. Let
It's
me
a
think.
big
Let me
name.
think.
I'll give you a hint, okay? We have mentioned this name this season.
This season,
Uh-huh.
well, we mentioned a lot of people. Who we mentioned? That's a wild thought. I feel like I'm just filling air. Parv? Is it Parv?
It's not
I feel
Parvati.
like we mentioned
Okay,
Parv.
I'll give you one more hint. Last hint, okay?
This is
We
hard.
mentioned her name this episode.
This episode. That can't be true.
We did. I promise you.
Am I being dumb? Oh, so it would have been one of those girls that won. Is one of the immunities. Is it Jenna
Not Jenna.
Wigglesworth?
Wigglesworth
Really?
at 85.
Mm.
Confessionals.
That's surprising.
That season, Richard Hatch had 91.
Okay, that makes
So-
more sense.
It took that many seasons to break the record for most female
wild.
confessions.
That's
I
wild.
don't know if people actually care about that. I just thought that was very fascinating.
Well, you love confessionals though, so you were. Of
I
course gonna
do.
mention
I
it.
don't know why I like it so much. Okay, final four. Rachel wins. What do you think about her decision? Sending Sam and Teeny and taking Sue to the final tribal.
Yeah, I feel like there was nothing to. She didn't have to prove anything, and I genuinely think there was a good chance that Sam goes, unless Sue was like, no, send me in, I'll take him out. Yeah, send those two, and whatever happens, happens. I appreciate that she wasn't scared that like it was gonna give him too much. It was gonna be too much of a feather in his cap. She was like, nope, you guys are just gonna go and figure it out. Me and Sue are just gonna chill.
Yeah. I feel like we are just beyond past that line of thinking. That only lasted a couple seasons. I don't think it was as prominent as maybe like we made it out to be. But this
Mhm.
idea that like you have to go to fire to prove yourself. And in fact, I thought she talked about it great in Final Tribal, where she said, "Why would I send myself to another challenge? I already won a challenge to earn. So like, why do I? You know what I mean? Like, I'm like that is a very good way of thinking about it. It's like
Yeah,
I won a challenge. Why should I have to ignore that win and win this one instead?
and the
So
only time is if you have to make up ground. Like if see, here's a great example: Wendell and Dominic in their season. Their games were so lockstep that it was hard to make a decision between the two. If they decided to go into fire against each other, then or not even against each other, but that's just like a feather in your cap that you can be like, oh, I did this. It'd probably have to be against each other. But like, yeah, you don't want to just be like, oh, no, I'm gonna let somebody else take you out. No, you want to be that person that makes that decision or makes
well,
that move.
I feel like it all boils back to Chris Underwood doing it. And I just
Mhm.
think the context for him is so much different, where it's like
Oh,
he
yeah.
literally had to. He had zero resume. And
Mhm.
he also did it because he knew no one else was going to take out Rick Devens. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the context that people miss when they're like, why didn't you go to fire? You should have done it. It's like, I think it makes sense if you know you're the only person. But like, if Rachel's not confident she can take Sam out, then absolutely do not do that. You know what I mean? Like, she wanted him out, and I think the only thing she probably could have done differently is maybe send Sue, because I think I'm just assuming Sue was probably better at fire than Teeny was. Like if
Mhm.
she actually wanted him out. But I think what that did was just kind of show that it's like, look, it doesn't really make a big difference who wins fire here. I'm sitting at the end, and I feel confident no matter who wins.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the only place other than Chris Underwood that it could be applied is when it's the same context with Natalie in Winners at War,
Sure.
where it's
Yeah.
like, because that's literally the same thing. It's like, man, you missed the entire game, and so you have to play an entire game's worth of game in like 4 days.
Mhm.
And so he set the blueprint for what that looks like. The one time we ever saw it, and she had to take out Tony, and she didn't try to.
Yeah.
So
Completely agree. In this case, Rachel did not have to take out Sam, as we saw.
nope. She was pretty comfortably ahead of him, I think.
I did like the conclusion to the Teeny and Sam rivalry, and in hindsight, I'm like, okay, so they were just building up towards a duel in fire, I guess. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of the conclusion of their arc, and I gotta say, like, kudos to Teeny for at least like being self-aware at the end there of like her
Hmm.
dislike towards Sam, because at the time it felt very ignorant, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, so at least she like is aware of whatever bias she's carrying with her
Yeah.
and acknowledging that, yeah, this rivalry, it's really that I don't like him for personal reasons. He really hasn't done anything to me.
Yeah, it showed the thing where like he's like, "Oh, I haven't like I don't know how to make fire." And they thought he was just being a jerk. And then he just actually has no idea how to make fire. And it was like,
Yeah.
see, like they've built up this like person that they think he is, and it's just not necessarily true. Not saying he's the best person in the world by any means.
No, but
It
like
was
this like charming challenge beast that's good at fire, like all these
Mhm.
things that like he has shown time and time again, he is not that person.
Yeah, he's not. He's the worst. It is interesting. Like, I wonder if Teeny's the one that they want to bring back for like redemption after that. Because I feel like it's not a satisfying end to her story. Like, it's not a satisfying end to those two
Yeah.
going. If it was storybook, but Survivor's not storybook, and I kind of appreciate that as well. Where it's like it's not going to give you the beautiful ending that you want every single time.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. I almost feel like it's a good enough conclusion to like her story, where I think like she comes on the show as, what I assume is a pretty big super fan. Obviously, like, identity is a big part of like her personal story, so I think to see that wrapped up in some of the like strategy and dynamics on this season,
Mhm.
especially like concerning her relationship with Sam, it just feels like there was like enough self-discovery there, and then also, I don't know, like this super fan that maybe is humbled a little bit of like,
Yeah.
we've been saying it, but it's like I think everyone, or at least a lot of people, thought she'd be much better at this game. Then turns out it's like, oh, you're just like admittedly clueless on what's happening.
Hmm. Just being charming and like people liking you and you being social does not mean you're going to be good at Survivor. And I think she's kind of the
No,
textbook lesson of that.
right. I think if we're walking down that line of like redemption, I mean, to me, I think Andy's the biggest one
Oh
that
yeah.
would bring back.
Hmm.
Which we don't need to get into him because he wasn't really on this episode. But I think that's the story similar to Teeny's of like, let's see him on Survivor 50 and see if he learned
Hmm.
anything. I don't know.
Yeah. And at the same time, I almost feel like his story is more complete to me because he did this awesome move. He like saw the flaw that his game wasn't understood, and when he tried to remedy that, he just talked to the wrong person. He just
That's
it
true.
was mistimed. So I don't know. It's tough to really tell.
It's also just tough to tell what Jeff is talking about when he describes the returning players on 50 are going to be in that mold. I don't
Yeah.
know. I think Jeff has a very specific idea of what he's looking for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's gonna handpick who he wants and just hope
I
that they're
I'm
gonna be
fully
there.
prepared to be disappointed by this. And I'll be honest,
I
when we saw
was.
the preview for 48, I was kind of like, I don't know, sure, like here we go, another one. Like
It's just the same iteration
I
again, and
want
we're
to
gonna see
get
what
to
happens.
50. That's all I
Yeah,
want.
and then I want 52 and 54 to also be returner seasons, whether it's fan versus favorite three, whether it's a second chances for the new era. Like I think we might see a full returning season of the new era for 50. I don't think that's the case. I think there's gonna be people from. I think it's gonna be new era versus old era. That's just my take. Who knows? Um, And so that at that point we're getting 10 people and there's no chance that all 10 of those people are going to be people that it's like I want that person back because it never is. It's never a perfect group, which
No.
means there will be like a leftover like 30 people that I still want to see play again. And so it's been cool going this long period without having any returners and it's the longest ever. Yeah, it has to be the longest ever going 9 seasons. And so I want to see more people back.
The only one I could think that, like, oh, because 20 you had where they would like just pull like 2 or 3, right? Like one
Yep.
per tribe. That was like that phase.
Mm-hmm.
The 30s didn't have a ton. Well, that's not true. I guess they had second chances, then also game changers.
And then also 38, they had 4 people come back.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the
And then
only
if you
one I could think
early on,
of.
they have All Stars. Then they had Bobby John and
Well, when was
Steph
that
come
one?
back. That was 11. That would have been Guatemala.
Okay, never mind then, because I was thinking the biggest gap might have been post All Stars, but I forgot about that one.
Nope. So that one snuck in there, and then
Fans
obviously
versus favorites.
versus
Yep.
favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is truly like the longest it's ever been. That's insane.
Mhm.
Since All Stars, then season 1
Yeah.
All Stars. Wow,
Yeah, probably.
because that was season
All
8.
Stars was 8. Yeah. And yeah, I'm like
Absurd.
doing the math in my head. Yeah, it's crazy. And I think those seasons are so much fun. And yeah, it'd be really cool to see a lot of these people come back out and try again.
Yeah,
Not maybe not from this season, but a lot of people from the last 8 now that we've seen, right? This would be 8. No, I guess it'd be 7. I was counting like yeah, it doesn't matter. We don't need I'm dumb.
all right, let's get back to this episode. Should we talk about Sue's game at all? I know you
I don't
probably
have
don't
much
care
to
to.
say. It was her final tribal was I'm old actually, guys.
I definitely felt for her, and I'm sure there was more that was kept out of the edit, but like to get to final tribal and just make it so obvious that she's in 3rd place.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
like, what do you do at that point? You know what I mean? Like, the most of the questions weren't directed to her. I thought she answered them well. Like she
Yeah.
did nothing wrong. I think her game was just like, here's my game. That's it.
That's just how it happens. A lot of times there's that extra person where it's just like, sorry, you're not in the running, actually. We're gonna ask these people questions.
Yeah. I guess I have nothing to say about her either, other than, yeah, no, that's it. Sue.
All right. There was something said that I think deserves conversation, and I'd love to hear your thoughts of it. The comparison of Rachel's game to
Yeah.
Mike Holloway and Ben
Oh.
put my brain in a pretzel, and I've been wrestling
Yeah.
with it all day since I watched it. So I'd love to hear what's your take on that.
Well, my initial thought was, I don't know if we've ever had a winner reference like this that has just been admittedly like, oh, this person's a bad winner. Like it
Yeah,
just felt
that's
like this like acknowledgement is like, well, like these 2 people that win, and yeah, how like they're not considered good winners. I'm like, Survivor
they
usually
suck.
they like try to shy away from that. I feel like, like they don't want to admit that like some seasons or some players or some winners are better than others. The only time I can think of that happening was on Winners at War, when it was like Michelle talking to Boston Rob about like, her season and how like she feels like she's not a great winner compared to like what people say about her, and he kind of was like talking her up a bit, But that was like more like self reflection, right? So I just thought it was hilarious just in front of Jeff Probst being like, yeah, how Ben's a bad winner?
Yeah.
I personally enjoyed it. But I wish he pushed back a little more, because here's the thing, okay? I first off, I don't think Mike and Ben are comparable. People know I don't love Ben, okay? If you've listened to this podcast at all, no surprise. We've talked about him at Winners of War. We've talked about him on the challenge a lot. I think his game of just finding idols to get to the end with the firemaking twist, I think that's the combination that people forget, is that it was a surprise twist to the people that season. Mike, I think, won his way to the end in what was established Survivor rules forever.
Yeah.
Rachel, so already I see a difference between their games. Rachel did a combination of that. It's not like she did only one. She won at challenges, also found advantages, and even the advantages came in different ways, right? Ben idol hunted every day, and where he got used to where they were hiding. Rachel got an advantage given to her by someone else because of her social game. She found one on a
Mhm.
reward challenge, and she also found an idol. So 3 different ways of finding advantages. So I don't know. I wish she would have pushed back on Andy because I was like, she like got to the end by like keeping herself safe through these things, but through a diverse means. It wasn't just the same thing over and over and over again.
Mhm. Yeah, but Ben was a bad comparison from the beginning. Ben never won immunity. It was just idols. So that's just an unfair comparison altogether. So I just removed that immediately. Also, I think Mike made an enemy of himself at the auction and then had to win, otherwise he was going. I think he only had one idol play because he only lost. Yeah, he won immunity twice, and then an idol play, and then won it 3 more times. And so he had to win because he made that mistake at the Survivor auction. Yes, he was probably a target, and people were probably thinking about him before that, but that was kind of the catalyst. When
Mm-hmm.
Rachel won her first challenge, at least, and keep me honest, I don't think she was the number one target to go at that point. At that point, that was, I think, probably the Kyle vote. Yeah, that was the Kyle vote. So she won immunity, and she was never going to be the target. Like they were going to try to go for Kyle. Somebody just needed to beat him.
Yeah.
And then it was Operation Italy where she won it again. She might have been the target. I don't remember. She probably would have
I think
been,
she
but that's just
was,
because.
but that's at least what the edit wanted us to think to hype
And that
up her
was
win.
Genevieve. Like there was just this like rivalry between Genevieve and her, and so she would have been the target of Operation Italy because Andy
Mm-hmm.
happened to be switching at that point. Like it wasn't until I think the idol was played that it was like Rachel is the best player in this game and we need to get rid of her. Genevieve had been saying that for a while, but that was like a rivalry thing. So I don't know. You're right. It feels different. And that's just how the game works. When you come out as that big of a threat, you have to win immunities to get to the end. It's like another tier of player where you're so good that people just aren't worried about going against you, even though you clearly played a better game. And there's only a couple people that can be in that branch and just get there without winning anything. Or you just keep the right threats in for a while. But yeah, her threat management maybe at the end wasn't great, but she obviously had the ability to do it, and so it feels different to me. And yeah, I'm still not 100%. There's still a part of me that's like maybe that's unfair that it feels different to me, but it does feel different to me.
No, I mean, like I said, I think to me the biggest difference is that it was a combination of multiple things.
Mm-hmm.
Where Ben was idols, Mike, like, yes, idol, but like mostly challenges. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can silo their games into a this is how they won. I don't think you could do that with her because it was multiple things, you know? Like on
Mm-hmm.
Ben's season, Chrissy ties the record with Rachel for you know what I mean? So it's like I don't
Yeah.
think that's fair to be like, "Oh, she played like Ben." Like, no, she played like Chrissy actually, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
comparison from that season. So I don't know. I almost appreciated Andy bringing it up because I think it was Soul in a confessional before Final Tribal started that mentioned that was like like I want to hear how Rachel played this game that didn't just rely on advantages and immunity wins, which is, you know, a
Mm-hmm.
fair question. And
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping Andy was setting her up to like dispel that, but then she kind of didn't necessarily, at least as
Yeah.
strong as I think she could have.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was ready to go at bat for her. I was like, oh, let me tell you how, you know, her game is
Yeah.
different than
Yeah.
those two bozos.
Yeah. The idea that she just had immunities or just had like all these advantages and she just got lucky. That's kind of the game. So first of all, she gets the advantage Soul gave her. To
Mm-hmm.
say that she had been swapped onto a tribe with entirely Tuku. It was her and Tuku. So the fact that she got that advantage and that was in the game, I would say it's just as lucky as how unlucky she was that she got put in that spot. Like I would say those just kind of cancel
Yes.
out and she got lucky that she got to survive such an awful swap. Because sometimes you get swapped and there's just nothing you can do. Maybe there would have been a crack. Tuco at that
Yeah.
point might have split, but I don't think so. And then you have, yeah, she happened to get the food that had an advantage. Yeah, and she also got it in front of everybody. Like that takes skill and didn't play it when she needed to. Block of vote she got from a Journey. Was that where she got that?
I thought the block of
I
votes
can't
she
even
got
remember.
from the food,
Oh, maybe. I
and
couldn't
then the
remember.
idol she found.
Oh, maybe. Something like that. Anyways, so she like I don't know, she happened to accumulate a lot of things. She still played them all at the right time. And I saw she was asked why she didn't talk about the shot in the dark play. To her, that was just like she didn't want to be the only one voting. I think when did she play it? I guess she didn't want to be the only one voting for Gabe, who Sierra also voted for. Like she didn't want to be wrong, and so she like played her shot in the
Yeah,
dark, and then realized in the moment, oh, I can also read the faces and see if this is gonna help me at all. And so like to her, it wasn't that big of a deal. It's just all of us that were like, that's crazy, and so that's why that wasn't mentioned at all. But like to me, that was a pivotal play to like set herself up and make sure, okay, I'm good here. I don't need to use this.
yeah. No, I completely agree. I was kind of hoping she would have brought it up, so that makes sense why she did it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other opposing to that, I kind of wish Sam brought up Operation Italy a little bit more. I feel like that was almost not touched on much at Final Tribal. You know, like because that to me, I think like that was like one of the biggest things that he could have done, and you know, really honing in. And I think he did a good job of like showing like, hey, I didn't have any advantages or immunity, and I'm still here with
Mm-hmm.
Rachel. So like, what's the difference? I did it all without that stuff. You know, I thought Operation Italy would have been the best example to show how skilled he is, despite having none of those.
And the hard part is that you have the two people that you did that with. And I would almost, I don't know, would you say that he could take the least amount of ownership from that? Like he
Perhaps,
didn't make
yeah.
or have the fake idol. He didn't come up with the whole plan and wasn't the person flipping to make it happen. He had to lie, yes, he had to do the acting for sure, but like that's a hard thing for him to just like fully grasp onto and claim
hmm
with Andy and Genevieve just sitting in the jury.
I think that's a moment where you stroke their egos, where it's like,
True.
yeah,
Yeah.
you remember this move I did with Genevieve and Andy? Like, you look at them in the eyes and just be like, they did all this work, blah blah blah, but like I helped, right? I was a part of
Mhm.
this. In fact, they did such a good job that their threat levels went up, so it worked out for me. You know what I mean? Like I had to
Mhm.
do the least amount of work within that, but I got to be a part of it and then also stay in the game, right? So I don't know.
And I
That's how
guess he
I would
tried
do
to.
that.
Because he mentioned the like, oh, I leaked this information to Teeny, but then Rachel was immediately like, yeah, we didn't believe that at all. Like we thought that was a 100% lie.
Yeah, that
Like you
was a
didn't
bummer.
fool us. And so that was maybe that was his one chance to be like, because that's the thing that he had ownership from that move.
hmm
And she was immediately like, yeah, we thought that was BS.
Yeah, I guess that is true. That is tragic for him. When the
That just
jury,
occurred to me. I forgot about that moment. They
when the
they were
jury
feisty though,
doesn't.
especially him. He was snapping back on a couple things.
No, and it was so much fun. And I mean, I've been
Yeah.
saying this for weeks, but like their back and forth and their relationship has been so enjoyable. And I almost wish we would have saw more of it throughout the season. You know,
Hmm.
like there were a couple times I don't remember after the Sierra vote where they kind of like had this almost breakup of like, hey, I don't think we can play together. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
were both blindsided last night, but I think we had to go our separate ways. Like, okay, best of
Yeah.
luck. And then eventually grew to become rivals that would duke it out in Final Tribal. So I don't
Hmm.
know. Like I do really wish that we would have seen more of that play out throughout the season. Because a lot of times it was more like Sam versus Teeny, Rachel versus Genevieve. Um, so I don't know. I'd be curious, like rewatching it, if you would pick up more on that.
Hmm. Do you think so? We've talked about how the trio of women, Genevieve, Caroline, and Rachel, all played very similarly. Um, do you think there was something that set Rachel apart from those other two, or do you think that just happened to be how the cards fell in this particular game? Like if they had been reshuffled, one of the other ones might have won, or something like that, or
Well,
if they got the advantages even.
and that's where I think I mentioned earlier, where it almost feels like that's the idea of what Rachel wanted to do, but
Hmm.
she was forced to play the
True.
other game of advantages and immunity wins, right?
Yeah.
Because there were very few times where she had any control. Like, I don't know if
Mhm.
there's a specific vote you can look at and say she controlled this. And so I think for Genevieve's situation, she just went too hard too fast. The soul vote was kind of it for her. Like, once people
Mhm.
saw that, and once, people like Caroline and Rachel clocked, like, oh, that's the control we want. Genevieve can do that. We got to get her out. And I think for
Mhm.
Caroline, I think it was just she had it, but it was Rachel winning immunity at that tribal, so that
Mhm.
wasn't an option. So it's like, okay, Operation Italy, we gotta go for someone. Let's do Caroline instead. You
Yeah.
know. And so I think if Rachel doesn't win immunity, perhaps Rachel goes there, and then Caroline does continue to strategize her way to the end. But I don't know. I think she almost needed to play a little harder in that moment. Um, but I think that is the biggest difference is like Rachel just didn't end up playing that way despite her
Mhm.
probably wanting to.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, you can tell that like the analytical, strategic mind, she wanted to do more and just couldn't make it happen because they clocked each other. They were all like, "Oh, yep, they're a problem," and that doesn't
And
happen often. Where people are like that, like they're nope, they're too similar to me. They're trying to play what I'm playing.
yeah. And I would almost say the same thing for Sam, where Sam I think probably wanted to be more of this like dominant, challenge
Yeah.
beast. Maybe he didn't, I don't know. But like that's why Gabe and Kyle probably aren't here, right? Is
Hmm.
because people finally realize like, oh, Sam's not actually winning challenges, and then that allows Sam to lower his threat level and then play the opposite of that, which was more the
Hmm.
underdog strategist that didn't win anything.
Yeah. It's almost like the best path to do is to try to do what they don't expect you to.
I would say so, honestly, because
Yeah.
like I think the
It's
second that
interesting.
you start to see like, oh, they're not actually good at this, but I think it almost forces you to because I think people do get too comfortable. I think once Genevieve realized like she can control a vote,
Hmm.
that's when it went to her head and she did it and that ruined her game. And I think the same thing like Kyle, it's like you probably didn't need to win that many. Straight
No.
up, you know what I mean? Like unless you're planning on doing this the rest of the game, I think you only want to get on that hot streak second half of the
Yeah.
individual challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely. The hard part is he had already set himself apart as like a problem when it came to um like even the team challenges. Like you almost don't want to be too you don't want to stand out too much for being good for your team in the team challenges because then he'll get picked off early on in the individual portion.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a valid point.
Threat level is such a hard thing and such a complex thing. It's why I love Survivor is like man, that was a bad move, but it lowered your threat level, so like it might have been a successful move. Yeah, I love the nuance.
Well, and that's where I think Rachel's game was really ideal in a lot of ways because I think her threat level was so low up until the point where it sounds like it wasn't, right? like, but as soon as people clocked her, that's when she turned it on.
Yep.
And I mean, we talked about like her eulogy. I mean, that like, can you have a more ideal situation where
No,
everyone is praising how good of a game you've played?
it's
And
insane how
surprise,
confident they were.
I'm still in the game. And
Yeah,
in fact, you will not get to vote me out the rest of the game right
they
after you
didn't
hype
throw
me up.
a single vote for. Well, I guess Stu was with her, so a single vote off wouldn't have done anything. So yeah, they were just kind of screwed at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like it really is the most ideal situation. And I don't think she just did that by luck. I think it was a lot of skill. So I don't know. I think she
Hmm.
was a great winner. Um, where do you think this ranks amongst new era? That's the question.
Winners or season?
Both. You can answer whichever you like first because I think that is it's getting harder the more seasons we got here.
I'm pretty confident. I don't think this is as a season. I don't think I liked it as much as 45 or 46, but I think it's right behind those. Um,
I could see that.
I think it was a good season. I don't know that there were many people that I like really loved on this cast. There was good gameplay. There was Operation Italy for sure, but there's a lot of people that I disliked, and so that makes it tough.
Kind of a
I think
boring pre-merge.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so.
Like, you got the Rome
You,
situation, that's kind of it.
you had you had Rome, Gabe, and Andy each on their own tribes, annoying me with how cocky and confident they were. Andy, not so much how cocky and confident he was, but like he was just annoying me for other reasons, I suppose. When it comes to winners, or here, where do you rate it? We'll do seasons first. Where do you rate the
I
season?
think
I would
I
put it
think
third.
probably there as well. But it's also very hard to like even remember totality of like early seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like what were my thoughts on 42 as a whole? You know, like was I feeling a little burnt out? You know, right before the merge hit, was I annoyed with the boot order? Like was
Mm-hmm.
there? It's so hard. But so initially, I would say yes. I like 45 and 46 more than this, despite having a couple standout moments like Operation
Yeah.
Italy. I think that's probably it, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the moment that potentially could have put this on one of the great seasons.
And this is always the tough one to place is season 43 for me, just because I genuinely was like, this is a top 5 season for me going into that finale, and then took a nosedive. But we
Yeah.
don't need to talk about that. When it comes to where you would place Rachel as a winner, Nathan, what are you thinking?
Oh my goodness. I think she'd also be up there for me. Now, I think I'm still comfortable putting D as number one, which is I think where we've had her previously. I think like
Mm-hmm.
we're both
Mm-hmm.
very high on her game. Other contenders, Marianne's a strong winner. Even like Kenzie had a good game last year. I'm not upset by that win, but I think
Mm-hmm.
I would place Rachel maybe above Kenzie, competing with Marianne.
Okay, yeah. I have the same D or similar. D number one. I think I have Kenzie at third and Marianne
Mm-hmm.
below that. And then I put Rachel second in my ranking, I
Okay.
think. Pretty comfortably.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
good game.
I was talking about the like next level of like, oh, people you don't have to win at the end because people don't even realize that you're that big of a threat. And I think D fits that bill where she just wasn't targeted at the end, even though she was clearly, at least from our eyes, the front runner. And yeah, she didn't have a dominant win necessarily. It was 5-3, and she had like the running mate of Austin. But excuse me, that was the first cough in account while I was talking, so we're doing well.
Proud of you.
Um, but she had like the move where she told Julie to play her idol, but still
Yeah.
voted for Julie. And then like yeah, just like the way she manipulated all of those situations and was still able to make it to the end. She's definitely still the best of the new era for me, but Rachel I put right behind that.
Yeah, I don't think I would disagree with that. Um, I'll definitely have to do a refresher once we get to the end of this era to fully, see where they all line up. And then, man, to stick these winners in, it must have been 3 years ago now that we did our full winners ranking.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be complicated if we ever revisit that. Maybe when we get to 50, we'll have to revisit it and stick these in.
Oh, it's gonna get all reshuffled if I have to do it again, honestly. But we should for season 50. That'd be a cool like
I
landmark.
mean, I had people in my top 10 that I didn't even watch their season, so I might have to actually
True.
watch every Survivor season before.
Yeah. And
That's
like
fun.
I have my friends who are rewatching all the seasons. Just sitting with them and like hearing them talk about seasons makes me rethink where I had people and stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, this is all important stuff. Like, we got to get this right. We have to settle
Yeah.
on who the best is.
This is so important.
All right. Is
Ooh,
there
the old
anything
sword
else?
of Damocles. I forgot about that.
Wait, what?
Sword of Damocles. It's something that Drew talked about in Survivor 45.
I have a Drew conversation starter that I don't know if this is worth putting on the podcast or not. I'll just bring it up, and if you want to shoot it down and not dive in because it could go off. Um, but he was on a podcast this week talking about this new phenomenon he's trying to piece together of people voting for winners at the end to try to alter their personal edit. Meaning, if I vote for let's say last season, okay,
Yeah.
Tiffany votes for Kenzie to win the game. Potentially, Tiffany's edit might raise for the actual show because she worked with Kenzie the entire time. Now, if Kenzie comes in third place, maybe Tiffany doesn't get that edit anymore because the edit is now going to go to Charlie and whoever he was working with. And so
Does he
Drew
think people
explained this.
actually do that?
Um, I think his point was more that it could be happening unconsciously.
Okay.
Sorry, not subconsciously, not unconsciously. People aren't
They
voting
just
while
go to
they're
sleep
asleep.
at the booth. Yeah.
But how that probably plays more into how people vote in the end that we might realize because people are also aware of how they might be perceived, or at least if they're not, like they could be subconsciously thinking about these things like, hey, if I do this thing, the show might portray me this way, which could, I don't know, hype me up as a Survivor player, get me on a future season, whatever. So I just thought that was interesting. I never thought about that. So again, I'll let you decide how much you want to unpack that
I don't
now.
buy it. I think
That's
I'd be interested to hear if he had like a scenario to point at, even if it was untrue, but it'd be like, hey,
Mhm.
say hypothetically on this season, this person voted not how we expected. Like, did Maria would be an example to the counter. Like voting for Charlie would have potentially raised her edit, but she voted for Kenzie. And I don't think that in any way would have raised her edit. You know what I mean? Like, so, but that's one person. So that's not like, that doesn't fit
I
the
think
bill, obviously.
he brought up for himself, and maybe that's just him admitting that he thought of this, but because he voted for Austin to win the game,
Yeah.
okay, he was thinking through, if Austin ends up winning the game, am I gonna be perceived as the person that Austin carried to the end, and I wouldn't have had a chance to win, or if Austin loses the game, am I seen as a stronger player because I was his partner that went home, and now Austin didn't win the game.
Interesting.
So again, I don't know if that's believable or not, but that was the example he mentioned.
I think he's going too deep with it. I don't think I buy it. I'll think
All
about
right,
it.
we'll end it there. Yeah, I'll unpack it some more. Maybe a separate side talk. We'll dive into.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on this season?
Great season. Big fan. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back sooner than usual. Survivor 48. What, February? Is that when it comes out now?
Yeah, something like that.
But
Real
here's
soon.
the thing. We only have a year left until Survivor 50 promos.
Oh, golly. That's true.
Because we'll get 49 in the fall, and then so 50, they got to start casting it real soon. I wouldn't be surprised
It
if
was just-
this is the last season where they would pull people from.
I think they'll try to pull from, well, they'll pull from 48. Or, yeah, you mean 48. I think they'll have like a spot designated for one person from 49 because they do that a lot with returning or shows like that. They'll like save like one spot.
Yeah, it all just depends on how they film it because sometimes they film them so close together that, like, I'm pretty sure 50 will be filmed before 49 airs. So they'll have to have a real good pulse on who the standout is here while filming.
Yeah, the ones that they picked in the past are Russell, obviously, Malcolm, obviously. Like those are some of the ones. I mean, probably James and Amanda before fans versus favorites. I don't know. It's hard to really know for sure what this filming schedule was way back then.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so we'll be back for the 48. Excited, I guess, but be a nice little break, I suppose, since we've been recording since July from Big Brother. Wow.
Yeah, I'm excited for the break.
For more episodes, you know where to find us, notgameopersonal.com. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your list of podcasts. Really, we're on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube at NGAPpod. That's at NGAPpod. I'm Nathan. This is Tony, and we will see you next season.
14 seasons, 2 pals, 1 survivor.